Hello, everyone. I know many of you are listening to this while preparing for sleep. Before we begin, take a moment to notice where you are and what time it is for you right now. You don't need to type anything if you're already drifting off. And if you enjoy calm stories like this, you can gently support the channel by liking and subscribing. Whenever you feel comfortable, now, let the rain fade into the background and allow the story to unfold slowly. The call came in just after 6:40 p.m., flagged as a suspicious juvenile. The woman on the line sounded irritated, not afraid. She told the dispatcher there was a boy loitering near the community playground, watching people, and making residents uncomfortable. She emphasized one detail 3 times. He didn't belong there. What she didn't say was that the child was 11 years old. When officers Ramirez and Holt arrived, the sun was already dipping low, painting long shadows across the empty swings. The boy sat alone on a bench, backpack at his feet, hands folded in his lap like he was trying not to take up space. He wasn't running. He wasn't hiding. He looked up when the patrol car stopped, eyes wide, unsure whether to stand or stay seated. The body cam caught everything. "Hey buddy," Officer Ramirez said gently. "What's your name?" "Eli," the boy answered. His voice shook. He explained he was waiting for his mom to get off work at the diner across the street. She'd told him to wait by the playground, where she could see him from the window. He held up his phone to show unread messages. No replies yet. That should have been the end of it. But the woman who made the call stormed across the grass before the officers could finish. Middle-aged, well-dressed, furious. "That's him," she snapped, pointing. "That kid has been staring at my house for days." The camera captured the moment Officer Holt asked the question that would later echo in courtrooms and comment sections alike. "Ma'am, do you know this child?" "No," she said. "But I know trouble when I see it." Eli's breathing got faster. He kept glancing at the officers, then at the woman, then down at his shoes. When she demanded they do something, Officer Ramirez asked if Eli had done anything illegal. "Well, no," she hesitated. "But he could." That single word changed the tone. The officers separated them. Ramirez stayed with Eli. Holt walked the woman back toward her house to get more details. The bodycam audio picked up Eli whispering, "Am I in trouble?" "No," Ramirez replied. "You're not." Minutes later, the situation escalated. The woman insisted Eli match the description of a boy involved in recent break-ins, claims police records would later show were completely fabricated. She demanded Eli be searched. When Holt refused, she raised her voice, accusing the officers of negligence. Then came the moment no one expected. As Holt turned back toward Eli, the woman lunged forward and shoved the boy, hard enough to knock him off the bench. The sound of his head hitting the rubber mat echoed sharply. Eli screamed. The bodycam footage shook violently as Ramirez sprinted forward, shouting commands. The woman was restrained within seconds, still yelling that she was protecting her neighborhood. An ambulance arrived. Eli was treated for a concussion and bruising. At the hospital, doctors found older marks on his arms, bruises from previous encounters. Child Protective Services was notified, not because of his mother, but because this wasn't the first time police had been called on him in that neighborhood. The footage went public 2 days later. What followed was swift and unforgiving. The woman was charged with assault on a minor, filing a false police report, and disorderly conduct. Prosecutors added a hate crime enhancement after investigators uncovered a pattern. She had called police on children of color 6 times in 3 months. Every call ended the same way: no crime, no evidence, just suspicion. In court, the defense tried to argue fear. The jury saw the video. They watched an 11-year-old boy sit quietly on a bench. They heard a woman say, "I know trouble when I see it." They watched her shove him to the ground. The verdict took less than 2 hours. Eli's mother later said her son no longer waits outside alone. He still flinches when he sees police lights, even though the officers who protected him still check in from time to time. And that body cam footage, raw, unedited, undeniable, became part of police training nationwide, a stark reminder that sometimes the most dangerous call isn't about what a child did, but about what someone decided he was capable of. The complaint was logged at 9:12 a.m., typed neatly into the HOA portal under violations, unapproved structure, eyesore, safety hazard. Attached was a photo of a small wooden ramp leading up to a single-story home at the end of Cedar Ridge Court. The ramp belonged to the Whitakers. For nearly a year, the ramp had been there so 16-year-old Lily Whitaker could get in and out of her house. Lily had been paralyzed from the waist down after a hit-and-run accident that was never solved. The ramp wasn't pretty, but it was sturdy, inspected, and approved by the city. The HOA didn't care. Karen Blake, vice president of the association, had been pushing to have it removed for months. Emails showed she called it a liability and warned it would lower property values. She was told repeatedly, by the city, by lawyers, even by the HOA's own counsel, that the ramp was protected under disability accommodation laws. Karen kept pushing anyway. On the morning of the incident, Lily's father, Mark Whitaker, was home alone. Lily was at physical therapy. His wife was at work. A knock came at the door, sharp, impatient. When Mark opened it, Karen stood there with two men from a private property compliance company the HOA had hired without board approval. They told him they were there to remove the ramp. Mark told them to leave. Body cam footage from a nearby officer, responding to a separate call down the street, would later capture the shouting that followed. Karen's voice was unmistakable. She accused Mark of playing the disability card and shouted that rules applied to everyone. Mark dialed 911. Before the call connected, one of the men grabbed a crowbar and stepped onto the ramp. Mark stood in front of him. The argument turned physical. Neighbors would later testify that Karen screamed, "Do it anyway." The crowbar slipped. Mark fell backward, striking his head on the concrete edge of the porch. By the time paramedics arrived, he was unconscious. He never woke up. The HOA issued a statement that afternoon expressing regret over an unfortunate altercation. Karen told police it was an accident, that emotions ran high, that no one intended harm, but investigators didn't stop there. They pulled HOA emails, text messages, internal chat logs. What they found painted a different picture: months of hostility, mocking comments about Lily's wheelchair, and one message from Karen sent the night before: "Tomorrow we end this ramp situation. One way or another." Prosecutors argued it wasn't an accident. It was reckless indifference fueled by authority without restraint. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The jury heard Lily testify from her wheelchair, her voice steady as she described her father building the ramp by hand, sanding every edge so she wouldn't scrape her arms. She told them how he promised she would always be able to come home on her own. They watched security footage of Karen pointing at the ramp moments before Mark fell. They read the message. The verdict came back: manslaughter. Karen Blake was sentenced to 12 years in state prison. The HOA was dissolved within 6 months, bankrupted by lawsuits. Cedar Ridge Court quietly removed its sign. The ramp was never taken down. Instead, it was rebuilt, stronger, wider, funded by donations from strangers who followed the case. And in the end, the structure the HOA called an eyesore became something else entirely: evidence, justice. And the reason an HOA complaint will forever be remembered as the first step toward a murder trial. For 2 decades, everyone on Maple Hollow Drive knew Thomas Keller as the reliable one. He watered lawns for neighbors on vacation. He shoveled snow without being asked. He fixed broken fences and never charged a dime. When someone new moved in, Thomas was the first to knock with a smile and a plate of cookies. That's why no one questioned it when 72-year-old Harold Bennett said Thomas had keys to his house. "They've been friends forever," neighbors said. Harold lived alone since his wife passed. His only son lived 3 states away and called once a week. Thomas checked on Harold almost daily, bringing groceries, helping with the stairs, sometimes staying late into the night to watch old war movies in the living room. When Harold stopped answering calls, no one panicked at first. 3 days passed. Then 5. Thomas told the son that Harold had been confused lately and might have gone to stay with a cousin. The son felt uneasy but trusted the man his father trusted. The wellness check happened on day 8. Police found the house spotless, no signs of a struggle. Harold's wallet sat on the kitchen counter, his medication was still neatly lined up, his bed looked slept in. Thomas stood nearby, concerned, helpful, answering every question before it was fully asked. Then an officer noticed the basement door. It was padlocked from the outside. Thomas said Harold had asked him to install it after a break-in scare. The explanation almost worked. until police asked for the key. Thomas hesitated. The basement smelled wrong. When they cut the lock, the temperature dropped sharply. The concrete floor was clean, too clean except for one large chest freezer humming in the corner. Extension cords ran along the wall, newer than anything else in the room. Inside the freezer was Harold Bennett, wrapped carefully, tagged with masking tape. Dates written in marker. The autopsy revealed Harold had been dead for nearly 3 weeks. Cause of death, poisoning. His heart medication had been slowly replaced with crushed pills from Thomas's own prescription, doses just high enough to weaken him, not kill him outright. Until the final night, financial records unraveled everything. Thomas had been siphoning small amounts of money from Harold's accounts for years. Nothing noticeable. Just enough to fund a second life, online gambling, private debts, and a mistress no one knew about. When Harold mentioned updating his will, Thomas panicked. Investigators found searches on Thomas's computer. How long does poison stay undetected? How to move a body without smell? Chest freezer electricity usage. In court, Thomas wept. He said he loved Harold like family. He said he never meant to kill him, only to buy time. The jury didn't believe him. They watched surveillance footage of Thomas wheeling the freezer into his basement at 2:14 a.m. They read text messages where he complained that Harold was becoming a problem. He was convicted of first-degree murder. Neighbors removed the cookies from their memories. The lawn tools rusted. And on Maple Hollow Drive, people learned a lesson that would linger long after the house was sold. Sometimes the person you trust the longest is the one who learns exactly how to destroy you, quietly, patiently, from just next door. Willow Creek was the kind of town where nothing ever happened. One stoplight, one diner, one high school where teachers knew students' siblings and parents by name. When 17-year-old Hannah Cole didn't come home on a Tuesday night, people assumed it was a mistake, not a crime. Her phone went straight to voicemail. By morning, the town was searching. Hannah had last been seen leaving her part-time job at the grocery store at 9:03 p.m. Security footage showed her waving to the cashier, earbuds in, hoodie pulled tight against the cold. She never made it the 4 blocks home. Police canvassed the route. No witnesses, no struggle, no abandoned belongings. For 3 days the case stalled. Then Hannah's best friend Maya did something no one else had thought to do. She opened Hannah's laptop. They had shared passwords since middle school, at 11:47 p.m. The night Hannah vanished, one unsent text sat in her drafts. If anything happens to me, check his truck. The message wasn't addressed to anyone. Detectives immediately focused on the word his. Hannah had recently ended a relationship with a 24-year-old man named Lucas Reed. He worked construction, drove a black pickup, lived alone on the edge of town. Lucas told police they'd broken up weeks ago, said Hannah was dramatic and liked attention. He claimed he was home all night, but his phone data told a different story. His truck's GPS showed it idling less than a block from Hannah's workplace at 9:06 p.m. A search warrant followed. Inside the truck, detectives found traces of blood beneath the passenger seat, cleaned, but not clean enough. In the bed of the truck, a shovel with fresh dirt clinging to the blade. They pressed Lucas. He denied everything. Then a cadaver dog hid on a wooded area behind an abandoned farmhouse 10 miles outside town. Hannah was buried shallow, still wearing her grocery store jacket. Cause of death, strangulation. At trial, prosecutors centered everything on that unsent text. They argued Hannah knew something was wrong, that she trusted her instincts enough to leave a trail. Lucas's defense claimed coincidence, faulty GPS, contamination, the jury deli. Berated less than 4 hours. Guilty. After the verdict, Hannah's parents spoke briefly. They thanked Maya. They thanked the detective who didn't ignore a single digital clue. Willow Creek put up a memorial bench near the grocery store. People sit there now, sometimes leaving flowers, sometimes just staring down the street Hannah never finished walking. And in a town once defined by silence, one unfinished text became the loudest voice in the room, speaking the truth when Hannah no longer could. When Emily Carter was found at the bottom of the staircase, the house was quiet, too quiet. Her husband, Nathan, told police he'd come home from work, called her name twice, and found her lying twisted at the base of the steps. her neck bent at an unnatural angle. A half-empty wine glass sat on the kitchen counter. The front door was locked. No sign of forced entry. The responding officer wrote 2 words in his notebook: possible fall. Emily had struggled with anxiety in the past. Nathan made sure to mention it, more than once. He said she'd been overwhelmed lately. Tired, emotional. The implication hung in the air. By the next morning, whispers had already spread through the neighborhood. She must have slipped. She was drinking. It's tragic, but these things happen. The medical examiner wasn't convinced. The first red flag was the bruising. Emily had deep contusions on both forearms, defensive injuries inconsistent with a fall. Her scalp showed impact marks from multiple directions, not just one tumble down the stairs. Then came the autopsy. The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma to the head, but the manner of death remained undetermined. That single word stopped the funeral from moving forward and opened a homicide investigation. Detectives returned to the house. They noticed something the first officer had missed: a faint drag mark on the hardwood floor near the top of the stairs, partially wiped away. They tested the wine glass. No fingerprints but Emily's. The bottle, however, contained traces of a sedative not prescribed to her. Nathan said it was from an old prescription. Pharmacy records proved otherwise. Emily had never been prescribed sedatives. Nathan had, after a workplace injury 2 years earlier. Investigators dug deeper. Neighbors reported loud arguments in the weeks before Emily's death. One recalled hearing a crash the night she died, followed by shouting that abruptly stopped. Phone records showed Emily had searched how to leave an abusive marriage just days earlier. When confronted, Nathan broke. He claimed they'd argued at the top of the stairs. Said Emily slipped while he tried to stop her from leaving, but forensic experts testified the injuries didn't match his story. The angle of the head wound suggested she'd been struck before the fall, at least twice. The jury saw photographs. They heard the 911 call again, noticing how Nathan never once tried CPR. The verdict: second-degree murder. In the courtroom, Emily's sister clutched a photo of them as kids, both smiling, unaware of what the future held. Outside, reporters asked how something so obvious had been missed. The medical examiner answered simply, "Because sometimes the most dangerous crime scene is the one that looks ordinary." Emily was laid to rest weeks later, not as a tragic accident, not as a suicide, but as a woman whose truth was finally heard. Because an autopsy refused to stay silent, the stop was supposed to take less than 5 minutes. At 11:18 p.m., Officer Daniel Ruiz pulled over a silver sedan for a broken taillight on Highway 47. The driver complied immediately, easing onto the shoulder without hesitation. Hands on the wheel. Window down before Ruiz even reached the door. Too cooperative. The driver identified himself as Marcus H. Ale, 34, clean record. He spoke calmly, almost politely, apologizing for the light and promising to fix it in the morning. The car smelled faintly of bleach, which Marcus laughed off as a spill from cleaning supplies. Ruiz ran the plates. Nothing. Still, something felt wrong. When Ruiz asked Marcus where he was headed, the answer changed. First home, then a friend's place, then back to home again. His voice never shook, but his eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror. Ruiz asked him to step out of the vehicle. The body cam recorded every second. As Marcus exited, Ruiz noticed scratches along his forearms, thin, parallel lines recently healed. When asked about them, Marcus said he worked with rescue animals. No uniform, no paperwork. Then the radio crackled. Dispatch informed Ruiz that another department had issued a bolo earlier that evening for a silver sedan seen near a missing person's last known location. The description wasn't exact, but close enough. Ruiz asked for consent to search the vehicle. Marcus said no. That's when the K9 unit arrived. The dog alerted at the trunk. Marcus's demeanor changed instantly. His jaw tightened. His breathing slowed like someone bracing for impact. Ruiz could be heard telling him to sit down. Marcus didn't resist, but he didn't speak again either. When officers opened the trunk, the smell hit first. Inside were plastic storage bins sealed with duct tape. One lid had cracked during transport. Beneath layers of garbage bags were human remains, carefully wrapped, labeled with dates and locations. 4 victims, all women, all missing within the last 2 years across 3 counties. Investigators later found a kit hidden beneath the spare tire: restraints, gloves, a camera, and a notebook. Each page detailed encounters, names replaced with initials, times recorded down to the minute. He rated them. Wrote what they saw. What they begged for. Marcus Hale had been invisible. He worked temporary jobs, moved frequently, never stayed long enough to be noticed. Families of the missing had assumed the worst, but never imagined their loved ones were traveling the highways in a stranger's trunk. During interrogation, Marcus spoke only once. "If that light hadn't been broken," he said calmly, "you never would have stopped me." At trial, the jury watched the body cam footage in silence. The moment the trunk opened, several jurors looked away. Marcus was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life without parole. Officer Ruiz returned to patrol 3 weeks later. He still stops cars for broken taillights, because on a dark stretch of highway with nothing but instinct and a blinking red light, 5 minutes was all it took to end a serial killer's run. For 15 years, Mr. Andrew Lawson was the pride of Brookfield High. He ran the debate club, stayed late to tutor struggling students, donated supplies out of his own pocket. Parents requested him by name. Students described him as the only teacher who actually listened. When he was named Teacher of the Year, the auditorium stood and applauded. No one noticed the pattern. Girls who once spoke freely in class grew quiet. Grades dipped suddenly. Transfers happened mid-semester with vague explanations. Guidance counselors chalked it up to stress, family moves, teenage drama. Then one student didn't move away. 16-year-old Claire Donnelly disappeared on a Friday afternoon in October. She was last seen leaving campus after debate practice, Lawson's practice. Her backpack was found 2 miles away near a creek. Her phone was smashed beyond recovery. The town panicked. Lawson helped organize search parties. He hugged Claire's mother at the vigil. Police initially ruled him out. He passed a polygraph. His alibi, grading papers at home, was support. By time-stamped emails sent that evening. The case went cold. 8 months later, a janitor reported a strange smell coming from a storage room beneath the old auditorium, an area rarely accessed after renovations. Investigators expected a dead animal. They found a locked cabinet instead. Inside were USB drives, neatly labeled by year. What those drives contained shattered the town. Hundreds of videos, hidden camera footage, classrooms, offices, cars, all filmed without consent. Some showed students crying, some begging, some clearly unaware they were being recorded at all. And in the background of nearly every video, Andrew Lawson's voice. Detectives reopened Claire's case. GPS data from Lawson's car, previously overlooked, placed him near the creek the night Claire vanished. The emails that proved his alibi? Scheduled messages, sent automatically while he was elsewhere. When police searched his home, they found a hidden room behind a false wall in the garage. Soundproofed. Cleaned obsessively. A single debate trophy sat on a shelf like a joke no one else was meant to understand. Claire's DNA was found in the drain. At trial, former students testified one by one. Some shook so badly they couldn't stand. Others read statements through tears, describing years of silence, fear masked as respect. Lawson showed no emotion. The jury convicted him on multiple counts, including first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life without parole. Brookfield High removed his photo from the wall, but the outline remained faintly visible for years. Parents now walk their children to after-school activities. Debate club was dissolved. And in a town that once trusted a man because he stayed late and smiled often, people learned a brutal truth. Sometimes monsters don't hide in the dark. Sometimes they grade your papers, hand you a trophy, and wait patiently for no one to question why EY never leave the building alone. The complaint came in at 2:37 a.m. A woman living in apartment 3B reported persistent thumping and scraping sounds coming from the unit below hers. She was annoyed, not frightened. Told dispatch it sounded like furniture being dragged again. Officers Nguyen and Patel arrived expecting a routine warning. The building was old. Thin walls, bad plumbing. Complaints like this happened every weekend. They knocked on the door of apartment 2B. No answer. The noise stopped the moment they arrived. They knocked again, louder. Still nothing. Nguyen radioed dispatch to try the tenant's phone number on file. No response. Patel walked the hallway, noting a faint metallic smell leaking from beneath the door. Something sharp, chemical, not quite rot. They called the property manager for an emergency key. Inside, the apartment looked normal at first glance. Couch, coffee table, television still on low volume. But the air was heavy, humid, as if something had been sealed too tightly for too long. The sound came again, a dull thud, slow, rhythmic, coming from the bedroom closet. Officers drew their weapons and opened the door. Behind hanging coats was a false wall, fresh drywall, poorly painted. When they pressed on it, it flexed. They broke through. Behind the wall was a narrow space barely large enough to stand in. Inside were plastic-wrapped bundles stacked carefully on top of one another. A shovel, heavy-duty trash bags, industrial cleaner, human remains, at least 3 victims. The tenant, 41-year-old Denise Holloway, was arrested 2 hours later after being found walking calmly along a nearby road. She showed no shock when officers told her what had been discovered. "I told them to stop making noise," she said flatly. Investigators learned Denise had lived in the building for 7 years. Quiet, polite, rarely had visitors. She worked nights. As a medical transcriptionist, alone, remote, unobserved. Her victims were transients. People whose disappearances barely registered. She lured them with offers of food, showers, temporary shelter. The noise the neighbor complained about? Denise had been trying to reposition a body before sealing the wall. At trial, the upstairs neighbor testified through tears. She said she almost ignored the sounds, almost turned up the TV. The jury convicted Denise on all counts, life without parole. Apartment 2B was sealed permanently. The building changed management. Residents moved out quietly, one by one. The woman in 3 billion still lives there. She says she can't sleep in silence anymore, because one ordinary noise complaint, filed out of irritation, uncovered the truth hidden behind the walls. And now, every sound feels like a warning she nearly ignored. Room 417 at the Harborview Motel wasn't special. Same faded carpet, same buzzing fluorescent light, same thin curtains that never quite closed. The kind of room people passed through without leaving a trace, or so management thought. At 1:09 a.m., the front desk phone rang. The clerk, Jonah Wells, almost ignored it. Night shifts were usually drunk guests or wrong numbers, but something made him pick up. All he heard at first was breathing, slow, uneven. "Front desk," Jonah said. A woman whispered, barely audible, "Please, don't hang up." Jonah straightened. He asked her name. She didn't answer. He asked where she was calling from. 417, she said, each number sounding like it cost her effort. Before Jonah could ask anything else, the line went dead. He immediately called 911. Police arrived within minutes and knocked on room 417. No response. The door was locked from the inside. Management provided a key. The room was empty. The bed was neatly made. No luggage. No personal items. The bathroom was dry. The window was OS said. Nothing was out of place, except the phone. It had been unplugged. Police assumed it was a prank. Jonah didn't. He insisted the caller was real. He described the breathing, the fear in her voice. He even remembered one detail he couldn't explain: soft tapping sounds in the background, like metal against glass. Investigators pulled phone records. The call had come from room 417. Security footage showed a woman entering the room earlier that night with a man. The footage glitched briefly as they reached the hallway near the room. An old camera with a known blind spot. The man never appeared again on camera. Neither did the woman. Housekeeping later found something strange behind the nightstand, a small smear of blood, wiped but not completely removed. Forensic testing confirmed it belonged to a woman. Days later, a maintenance worker inspecting the roof discovered a loose ventilation grate directly above room 417. Inside the shaft were scratches, fresh. And beneath the motel, in a locked utility crawlspace that hadn't been opened in years, police found her. The woman's name was Rachel Moore. She'd met the man online. He told her he was in town for work. Said the motel was temporary, safe, cheap, easy. He wasn't registered under his real name. The tapping Jonah heard? Rachel trying to signal through the vent while hiding. Her phone call was the only thing she managed before he found her. The suspect was arrested 2 states away after attempting the same routine. This time, the woman escaped. At trial, prosecutors played Jonah's 911 call, his voice shaking as he explained what he'd heard and how no one believed him at first. Room 417 was sealed after the case. The phone line was disconnected, but Jonah still works nights. And sometimes just after 1 a.m., he swears he hears breathing on the line. A reminder that one call, never meant to be answered, was the only reason the truth was ever found. It was supposed to be ordinary. The Martins had been planning this Sunday dinner for weeks. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Nothing fancy. Just family. Just laughter. Just a rare night where everyone was under one roof. At 6:02 p.m. the family began eating. At 6:03 p.m., tension surfaced. A minor argument between cousins escalated over something trivial, a misplaced plate, a spilled drink, a sarcastic comment. Voices rose. Words cut sharper than knives. Parents intervened. Calm was restored. At 6:04 p.m., a second argument started at the opposite end of the table. Uncle Roger disagreed with Aunt May on finances. His hands shook. She shouted. Children looked down at their food, unaware of what was about to happen. At 6:05 p.m., the front door slammed. A figure entered. Masked, gloves. Not a single sound except the click of a gun being cocked. Within 60 seconds, the room descended into chaos. Shouts, screams, plates shattered, chairs toppled. Someone tried to tackle the intruder. Another grabbed the baby from the high chair. At 6:06 p.m., the shooting stopped. 3 family members were injured, 2 gravely, 1 dead. The killer fled in a waiting car. Neighbors reported hearing the sirens within minutes. Police arrived to find blood everywhere, broken dishes, torn clothing, a baby crying in a corner. Investigators later discovered the motive was a bitter inheritance dispute, a secret that had festered for years. The masked intruder was a distant cousin who had been cut out of the will. He had studied the Martins' habits, knew the layout, knew exactly when everyone would be seated. Evidence collected, shell casings, fingerprints, surveillance footage from nearby homes, painted a clear picture. The suspect had a meticulous plan to strike during the family dinner, thinking 6 minutes was enough to take everything he wanted. In court, the jury watched a minute-by-minute reconstruction. The timeline was brutal, 6 minutes from laughter to tragedy. The rapid descent from normalcy to nightmare. He was convicted on multiple counts of murder and attempted murder, sentenced to life without parole. The Martins' home was eventually sold, but no one could ever reclaim the sense of safety that vanished in that single fleeting 6-minute span. Now, whenever a family sits down to dinner, there's a cautionary story whispered. Ordinary nights can turn extraordinary in the blink of an eye. And sometimes, 6 minutes is all it takes to change a life forever. It started as a live stream like any other. Jason Whitman, 28, sat in front of a webcam in his apartment, calm, composed, hands clasped. He had just been arrested for allegedly assaulting a woman at a downtown nightclub. On his channel, thousands of followers tuned in, some supportive, others skeptical. The title of the stream, "I Didn't Do This, Watch Me Prove It." Jason spoke directly to the camera, narrating every step he claimed to have taken that night. He showed receipts, timestamps, and even snippets of surveillance footage from nearby streets, everything he could think of to prove he wasn't there. He felt invincible, transparent, untouchable. But somewhere between the 5th and 6th hour of streaming, a message popped up in the chat. Someone had sent a clip from a nearby security camera, timestamped the exact same night as the alleged assault. The video showed a man with Jason's height and build, same jacket, same sneakers, walking toward the alley where the victim had said the assault occurred. Jason paused, tried to explain it away. "That's not me. Look at the hoodie logo, different color." The camera zoomed in. The logo matched, the shoes matched, even the walk, the distinctive shuffle, matched. Within the hour, investigators cross-referenced phone GPS data. Jason's phone pinged near the crime scene at the exact time of the assault. His earlier claims that he had been home were shattered. The live stream had become a digital confession, an unwilling one. Every denial, every proof he provided, was scrutinized and dismantled in real time by law enforcement and online viewers alike. By the next day, police arrested him formally for aggravated assault. The live stream was downloaded, edited, and presented in court. Every viewer became a witness. Every minute of video, every claim, contradicted by the cold evidence of cameras, GPS, and forensic analysis. The jury didn't need hours to deliberate. The visual proof was undeniable. Sentenced to 12 years, Jason's story became a cautionary tale. In a world obsessed with showing innocence online, sometimes the very platforms meant to defend you are the ones that reveal the truth. His live stream, once a stage to prove his innocence, instead immortalized the moment he tried to rewrite reality, and failed. It started like any typical Saturday night. The Johnsons had gone out for a dinner party, leaving their 2 young children with a babysitter they trusted for years, 20-year-old Megan Ellis. She arrived promptly at 6 p.m., brought snacks, and played quietly with the kids while the parents dressed. By 8:15 p.m., the house was silent, or so they thought. The first odd sign came when the parents called Megan to check in. No answer. Texts went unanswered. They assumed she was distracted. A few minutes later, the neighbor called to ask if Megan had been answering their loud music complaint. Silence. By 9 p.m., the parents returned home. The door was unlocked, the lights were off, the children's toys were scattered, but Megan was nowhere to be seen. At first they thought she had stepped out, until they noticed the kitchen window slightly ajar and muddy footprints leading to her. The basement door. Police arrived within minutes. The house was eerily quiet. The children were unharmed, playing safely in their rooms, as if nothing had happened. But the basement told a different story. When officers descended the steps, they found Megan's body, hidden in a small, dark storage area. She had been bound and strangled. The room smelled faintly of bleach, indicating someone had tried to clean up evidence. Investigators discovered a chilling pattern. Megan had recently been posting on a babysitter forum about a man who had been contacting her. Phone records revealed he had been tracking her for weeks. He had entered the house earlier that night while the Johnsons were out, waiting and hiding for the babysitter to arrive. The suspect, a local handyman who had worked for families in the neighborhood, charismatic, well-liked, and seemingly trustworthy. He had carefully studied the Johnsons' routine, timing his entry to coincide with Megan's shift. Evidence was meticulous. Fingerprints on the basement doorknob, DNA under Megan's fingernails, security footage from a neighbor's camera showing a tall man leaving the property minutes after the Johnsons returned. At trial, the children testified, through a guardian, about seeing a shadow near the basement door, their words hauntingly calm despite their age. Megan's phone contained texts warning a friend she felt watched. The jury deliberated for just 2 days. Guilty on all counts. Life without parole. The Johnsons sold the house months later, but neighbors still whispered about the babysitter who never came home. The community installed cameras, locks, alarms, anything to feel safe again. And for every parent who leaves a babysitter in charge, there's a chilling reminder. Sometimes the person you trust to care for your children becomes a witness, and the predator waits quietly in the shadows. Reverend Daniel Pye. Irsay had been the spiritual backbone of Cedar Mills for nearly 20 years. Sundays were filled with full pews. Weddings, baptisms, funerals. He presided over them all. People trusted him. He was the kind of man whose smile and handshake could calm tempers and bring comfort. No one suspected the darkness lurking beneath the pulpit. It began with Laura Benton, a young church secretary new to town. They met at a charity event, smiles exchanged, hands brushing. Nothing overt, nothing alarming. Just small gestures, whispered conversations, fleeting moments that could be dismissed. Or so Daniel thought. Soon, the small-town gossip mill noticed Laura staying late at the church office. Daniel's wife, unaware of anything, traveled for work frequently. The perfect opportunity. Then came the night that would unravel everything. Laura disappeared. Her neighbors reported she hadn't been seen for 3 days. Police began their investigation quietly, hoping to avoid panic in the tight-knit community. Daniel was cooperative. Almost too cooperative. He gave statements, pointed detectives toward friends and co-workers, offered alibis. Everyone believed him. until a dog named Max did what humans hadn't. Max, a cadaver dog brought in to search a wooded lot outside town, went straight to a recently disturbed patch of soil near the riverbank. Police dug carefully. Beneath layers of earth, they found Laura's body. Shallow grave. Signs of a struggle. Evidence suggested she had been strangled. Forensic analysis traced fibers from Daniel's office to Laura's clothing. Phone records revealed a flurry of messages the night of her disappearance. Desperate, pleading. When confronted, Daniel initially denied any wrongdoing. Then, under mounting evidence, he confessed, but only partially. He admitted to an argument that escalated but claimed her death was accidental. Detectives didn't buy it. The timeline, forensic data, and his attempt to bury the body painted a far more sinister picture. During the trial, the small town watched in shock. The pastor they had trusted to guide their moral compass had orchestrated deception, betrayal, and ultimately murder. Witnesses from the church testified, revealing the hidden tensions, whispered warnings, and strange late-night meetings. The jury deliberated for 4 days. Guilty, first-degree murder, life without parole. Cedar Mills never recovered its sense of innocence. The church remained, but the pews were emptier, prayers quieter. People spoke less of faith and more of betrayal. The case became a cautionary tale. Evil doesn't always wear a mask, it sometimes wears a collar. And the town learned, the hard way, that even the person guiding you toward heaven can bury you in a grave only 6 feet deep. It started with a selfie. 3 friends, Mia, Jordan, and Tyler, stood on the edge of the cliff at Sunset Point, grinning at the camera. The sky was a mix of oranges and purples, waves crashing far below. The caption read, "Living our best lives. #no fear, #sunset vibes, .brw." Within hours, the photo went viral in their small hometown. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments praising the view and their carefree smiles. The next morning, none of them had returned home. First, parents assumed a night of celebration. Friends thought maybe they had gone to a music festival or a weekend trip. Their phones went straight to voicemail. Social media posts stopped abruptly. Lice became involved after 24 hours. The area around Sunset Point was searched extensively. Helicopters combed the coastline. Lifeguards scoured the waters. Nothing. Not a footprint, not a discarded bag, not even a tire mark on the road leading back to town. Detectives pored over the photo itself. Something seemed off. The angle was unusual. The cliff appeared more treacherous. Shadows didn't match the time the image was posted. A faint reflection in Mia's sunglasses showed another figure behind them, someone not in the selfie. Tracking their last known movements, police discovered Jordan had received a message hours before the photo. From an unknown number, "Meet me where no one can see. You know the spot." Phone records placed them near an abandoned warehouse several miles inland that night. Surveillance cameras previously overlooked showed a black SUV circling the area repeatedly. Inside the warehouse, investigators eventually found evidence of struggle, torn clothing, discarded backpacks, faint bloodstains. And carved into a wall, scrawled hastily in pencil, "They saw too much." Weeks later, skeletal remains were discovered in a shallow pit behind the warehouse. Identification confirmed all 3 friends. Cause of death, blunt force trauma and restraint marks on their wrists. The suspect, a local man with a history of stalking, obsessed with documenting young people online. He had been monitoring social media posts for months, tracking victims who shared photos publicly. The trial was intense. Prosecutors emphasized how one innocent selfie had unknowingly signaled the exact moment the victims were most vulnerable. Defense tried to argue coincidence, but digital footprints, GPS, and phone messages told a different story. Guilty verdicts followed on all counts. The town still whispers about that photo. Parents caution teenagers about sharing locations online. Social media groups close early, cameras get checked. Because in the digital age, one single image can be the last thing you ever post. And for Mia, Jordan, and Tyler, it was a rainy Tuesday night when the call came in. The dispatcher, Linda Harper, had been on the job for nearly 15 years. She had answered countless, 911 calls. Robberies, accidents, fights. But something about this one made her stomach twist. The caller whispered, almost casually, "I think she's dead. And I can't get out." Linda's fingers froze on the keypad. The voice, it was unmistakable, calm, familiar, too familiar. It was her neighbor, Mark Dalton. Mark had always been quiet, polite, unassuming, a man everyone trusted. He had helped shovel sidewalks, returned stray dogs, delivered mail for neighbors. But now, he was confessing. Linda tried to maintain protocol. "Where are you? Are you safe? What's going on?" Mark didn't answer directly. He just laughed softly. "You'll see." The line went silent for 30 seconds. Heart pounding, Linda activated the trace and dispatched officers to his house. She knew every corner of that quiet street, every house. She knew Mark's. When police arrived, the front door was locked. No answer. The dogs didn't bark. The rain beat steadily on the pavement. They forced the door open. The smell hit them first, sharp, chemical, metallic. Inside, Mark's house looked normal at first glance, but in the basement, wrapped carefully in black tarps, were the bodies of 2 women, bound and gagged, their faces frozen in terror. The evidence made the news impossible to ignore. Mark Dalton had been active for nearly a year, targeting women in his neighborhood, always careful, always polite, always invisible. Linda's testimony later revealed the chilling moment that haunted her. She knew the voice. She had opened her own door countless times for that man. She had waved to him in the mornings. She had passed him in the street without suspicion. At trial, the prosecution played the 911 call in court. The courtroom went silent as the recording played. Linda's voice trembling. Mark's soft, taunting confession. Mark was convicted on multiple counts of murder and attempted murder. Life without parole. For Linda, the call left an indelible mark. She returned to work but could never answer another 911 call the same way. Every voice on the line carried the weight of what she had once recognized and ignored before it was too late. And in that quiet neighborhood, the lesson lingered. Sometimes danger doesn't knock loudly. Sometimes it whispers in a voice you know, right before you realize it's too late. It was supposed to be a night of celebration. Richard and Elaine Thompson were marking their 25th wedding anniversary. Family had flown in, champagne corks popped, and the scent of roasted lamb filled the dining room. Friends raised glasses. Laughter echoed off the walls of the Thompson estate, a sprawling home in a quiet suburban neighborhood. No one noticed the tension behind the smiles. At 9:15 p.m., a guest stepped outside for a phone call. Moments later, a muffled scream pierced the night. Guests froze, glasses in midair. Laughter vanished. The music stopped. By 9:17 p.m., the chaos erupted. A masked intruder had slipped into the house through the garage undetected. Within 2 minutes, the first victim was down. Elaine's cousin tackled too late, her arm broken. The attacker moved with precision, targeting only specific individuals. Richard tried to intervene. A struggle ensued in the hallway. By 9:18 p.m., the intruder was gone. Police were called. The scene was horrific: overturned chairs, smashed glass, bloodstains leading down the grand staircase. 2 guests were critically injured, 1 remained unconscious, and Richard and Elaine were shaken, but alive. Investigators uncovered a shocking motive: a bitter dispute over inheritance. The attacker was a distant relative, previously cut out of the family will. Surveillance footage showed him studying the estate for months, noting guard patterns, guest arrivals, and security blind spots. The intruder had planned for every detail, except the rapid respawn. See from neighbors who heard the screams. That one delay, mere seconds, saved lives. During the trial, jurors watched a minute-by-minute reconstruction. Each second from laughter to bloodshed, meticulously detailed, highlighted how quickly joy turned into terror. For the Thompson family, their anniversary, meant to honor decades of love, became a lifelong reminder of betrayal, danger, and the fragility of safety. The perpetrator was convicted on multiple counts of assault and attempted murder, sentenced to life without parole. The Thompson estate was sold quietly, security systems upgraded, and the neighborhood whispered about the night. Celebration became tragedy. In Cedar Hills, the anniversary was never celebrated again. Every toast now carried a shadow, one reminder that sometimes, in less than 6 minutes, the perfect night can turn into a nightmare under police tape. It was supposed to be a weekend adventure. 18-year-old Liam Harper had been hiking the Pine Ridge Trail with a small group of friends. The trail was well marked, popular with weekend hikers, and surrounded by dense forest. Liam was an experienced hiker, cautious, prepared, always checking in via his GPS tracker, but by Saturday night, Liam hadn't returned. His friends called the local authorities, reporting him missing. The search began immediately. Rangers combed the trail, helicopters scanned from above, and volunteers formed ground teams along the rugged paths. Days passed. There was no sign of Liam, no footprints, no personal items, no signal from his GPS. The search gradually shifted from rescue to recovery. Families held vigils. Social media campaigns went viral. The town was paralyzed with worry. Then a break came in the strangest of places. A call from a local man claiming someone had left a freezer outside his house. He said it looked abandoned and weird. When police arrived, the SME LL hit them first. The freezer had been running, its hum barely audible under the frost. When they opened it, what they found froze everyone in place. Liam Harper, inside, lifeless. The autopsy revealed cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head before freezing. Investigators pieced together his final hours. Someone had followed him on the trail, waited until he separated from his friends, and then abducted him. The perpetrator had carefully transported him miles away, storing him in a private residence's freezer to delay discovery. Digital evidence pointed to a man named Carl Mason, a local recluse with a disturbing obsession with hikers. His social media accounts revealed months of tracking outdoor enthusiasts, studying their schedules, and even photographing them secretly on trails. Police found other freezers in his garage, empty, but with traces of cleaning chemicals and duct tape. During interrogation, Carl remained unnervingly calm. "I just wanted to watch," he said. "I didn't mean to hurt him." At first, at trial, the chilling details emerged: meticulous planning, stalking, and the macabre storage of a victim to prolong fear. Witnesses described Carl's quiet life in the neighborhood: friendly but distant, never suspected by anyone. He was convicted on kidnapping and first-degree murder, sentenced to life without parole. The Pine Ridge Trail remains open, but hikers now take extra precautions. Families send GPS trackers, hiking in pairs, leaving plans with neighbors. And the story of Liam Harper serves as a stark warning: sometimes danger follows quietly, miles off the trail, until it finds a way inside your life, even to the cold, humming metal of someone's freezer. Dr. Evelyn Marks was considered one of the most trusted physicians in Brookhaven. For over 20 years, patients praised her compassion. Elderly residents relied on her for care, families trust. Her advice, and colleagues respected her clinical judgment. She was invited to speak at medical conferences, featured in local newspapers, and awarded for her lifetime of service. No one suspected what was happening behind closed doors. It began subtly. Elderly patients who lived alone began dying shortly after being prescribed new medications. At first, it was dismissed as natural causes: pneumonia, heart failure, complications of diabetes. But insurance audits noticed a pattern: unusually high doses, multiple prescriptions, combinations that were rarely seen together. A whistleblower, a young nurse who had worked under Dr. Marks, finally spoke up. She had noticed patients deteriorating after routine visits, unusual lab results being ignored, and Dr. Marks insisting certain deaths were expected for their age. Investigators dug into medical records. Over 3 years, more than a dozen deaths were now under suspicion. Autopsies revealed lethal combinations of medications, including opioids, sedatives, and heart drugs, administered in doses far beyond recommended limits. The chilling part: Dr. Marks documented everything meticulously in patient files. Every dosage, every symptom, every interaction, as if keeping a log for a dark experiment. When confronted, Dr. Marks claimed she was doing what was best for them, citing pain management and end-of-life care. But forensic pharmacologists testified the doses were intentional and would have caused rapid deterioration in otherwise stable patients. Her trial shook Brookhaven. Family members of the deceased testified about trusting her completely, often leaving elderly loved ones in her care with absolute faith. One widow broke down recounting how her mother had seemed fine one morning, only to be pronounced dead by the afternoon. The jury convicted Dr. Marks on multiple counts of murder and gross malpractice. She was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The case prompted widespread reforms in patient monitoring, pharmacy audits, and reporting protocols. Hospitals and clinics nationwide implemented stricter oversight to prevent similar tragedies. For Brookhaven, the horror lingered. The woman they had trusted with life itself had been secretly orchestrating death. And the lesson was stark. Sometimes, the greatest danger is not visible in the shadows, but in the person you invite into your home. And your body. The Hendersons were the kind of family everyone admired in Brookdale. Perfect lawns, shiny cars, 2 polite children, and a house that always seemed spotless. Neighbors waved, the kids got straight A's, and no one ever suspected anything was wrong behind the closed doors. That changed one chilly October evening. 12-year-old Sophie Henderson was sitting at the kitchen table doing her homework when she heard faint sobbing coming from upstairs. She called out, but no one answered. Shrugging it off at first, she assumed it was her imagination. But the next night, the sobbing returned. Louder, more insistent, coming from the attic. Sophie tried to tell her parents. Her mother, Claire, smiled nervously and said, "It's just the house settling, honey. Old houses make strange noises." Her father, Gregory, nodded silently. His expression unreadable. Sophie didn't believe them. Over the next few weeks, a strange odor started creeping through the house. It was faint, chemical, almost metallic. Sophie noticed it in the morning, when the rest of the family pretended nothing was wrong. She even saw her mother avoid looking at the attic door. Max, Sophie's older brother, decided he couldn't ignore it anymore. He tried the attic door. It was locked from the inside. A key had never been seen in the house. Fearful but determined, he called the police. When authorities arrived, they pried the door open, and what they found shocked everyone. The attic wasn't just storage, it was a hidden room, carefully concealed behind false walls and reinforced with locks. Inside were remnants of someone who had been living there, bedding, food wrappers, and journals filled with desperate entries. And then the grimmest discovery, a human body, partially concealed, wrapped in blankets. Forensic investigators identified the victim as Olivia Marks, a young neighbor who had disappeared 3 years earlier. DNA evidence confirmed it. Police pieced together the horrifying story. Gregory Henderson had abducted Olivia and kept her hidden in the attic for years. Claire Henderson had suspected something was wrong, but was too fearful to speak out, living in constant terror of her husband's temper. The journals, surveillance footage, and meticulous records revealed the full extent of the control he had maintained over Olivia. At trial, the testimony was devastating. Sophie and Max recounted hearing the crying, the strange smells, and their parents' suspicious behavior. Olivia's journals detailed years of captivity, fear, and manipulation. Gregory Henderson was convicted of kidnapping, false imprisonment, and murder. Life without parole. Claire Henderson received a reduced sentence for complicity under duress. The house was abandoned. One day, the attic sealed forever. For Sophie and Max, the lessons were grim but clear. The most terrifying horrors are sometimes hidden in plain sight, locked away behind doors you never notice, until the truth bursts out, shattering the facade of perfection. It was a quiet Friday night in Maplewood, the kind of town where nothing unusual ever happened. The Williams family had hired a new babysitter for the evening, 19-year-old Lila Monroe. She came highly recommended online, and the parents, trusting the reviews, left her in charge of their 2 children for just a few hours while they attended a nearby charity event. At 7:15 p.m., Lila settled in. The kids played quietly in the living room. The parents checked in once via text. Lila replied promptly, assuring them everything was fine. By 9:30 p.m., the mother's phone buzzed again. Lila's reply was strangely delayed, just 2 words, all good. When the Williams family returned home at 10 p.m., the house seemed normal. Too normal. No signs of forced entry. No mess. But something felt off. The children were in their rooms, unusually silent. Lila was nowhere to be seen. Police were called immediately. A search of the home revealed nothing at first, no evidence of an intruder. The babysitter had vanished. Then officers noticed the basement door was slightly ajar. It led to a small, dark storage area. Flashlights revealed Lila tied up in a corner, alive but terrified. Her mouth was gagged, her arms bruised. She whispered that someone had broken in while the parents were away, demanding access to the house. She had hidden in the basement when the intruder arrived, hoping the family wouldn't come home too soon. The suspect was discovered through security footage from a neighbor's house, a man unknown to the family, who had been casing the neighborhood for weeks. The police recognized him immediately. He had a long criminal record and had recently been released from prison. He had been using babysitters as targets, breaking into homes under their care. Further investigation revealed a chilling pattern. Several attempts in the last 3 months where young babysitters were placed in extreme danger, sometimes abducted temporarily, always narrowly escaping. Lila was lucky. At trial, the footage and Lila's testimony sealed the case. The perpetrator was convicted on multiple counts, including attempted kidnapping and home invasion. He was sentenced to life without parole. Maplewood changed its rules after the incident. Babysitters were required to register with local authorities before working, and residents installed cameras and motion sensors around homes. For Lila, the night left a permanent mark. She survived, but the fear lingered, a reminder that sometimes, the person who seems like a stranger may be the one watching more closely than anyone realizes. It was a humid summer night when the fire broke out at 3:42 a.m. in apartment 12C of the Evergreen Towers. Neighbors awoke to the shrill sound of alarms and the thick, acrid smell of smoke. Most assumed it was an electrical fault. The building was old, wiring outdated, and small fires happened from time to time. But one resident, Carla Mendez, knew better. She had lived in the building for 7 years and had seen her fair share of emergencies. Something about this fire felt deliberate. By 3:45 a.m., fire crews had arrived. Flames licked the ceiling of the living room, smoke filled every corner, and the heat was so intense that the glass windows cracked. Rescue teams evacuated tenants as quickly as possible. The first glance suggested the fire had started in the kitchen. Burn patterns indicated accelerants, something other than ordinary cooking oil. Fire investigators noticed residues that tested positive for gasoline. This was no accident. Inside apartment 12C, the tenant, 34-year-old Kevin Matthews, was missing. Firefighters found personal belongings intact in other rooms, suggesting he hadn't left in a hurry. The apartment appeared too organized for a panicked exit. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices earlier that evening. Some had seen Kevin arguing with a man in the hallway, a person they didn't recognize. Others mentioned that Kevin had recently changed insurance policies, adding significant life coverage. Police began digging. Surveillance footage from the building revealed a man wearing a hoodie entering Kevin's apartment around 2:30 a.m., carrying a small container and a rag. The timestamp correlated perfectly with the origin point of the fire. Forensic investigators traced the container to a nearby hardware store. Receipts linked it to a name that didn't match Kevin's. But after tracing phone records and GPS data, detectives narrowed it down. The suspect was a former business partner, Robert Lawson, who had lost a lucrative deal to Kevin months earlier and had motive for revenge and financial gain. During the investigation, officers discovered Kevin's body hidden in a storage closet, bound and unconscious, coated in soot but alive. He had been incapacitated before the fire started, placed in the closet to ensure he couldn't escape. Robert Lawson was arrested shortly after, based on physical evidence, GPS tracking, and witness statements from the building. At trial, the jury listened to audio from hallway cameras capturing the confrontation, the receipts proving purchase of accelerants, and Kevin's testimony about his ordeal. The prosecution painted a chilling picture: premeditation, betrayal, and near-fatal arson, all designed to mimic an accident and mask murder. The jury convicted Lawson on multiple counts: attempted murder, arson, and conspiracy. He was sentenced to life without parole. Evergreen Towers installed new security systems, fireproofing, and stricter access control. Residents moved out, shaken by how easily trust had been exploited. And for Kevin, surviving the fire didn't erase the trauma. But it did expose the terrifying truth. Sometimes, the flames you think are accidents are actually someone else's carefully crafted plan. Maplewood Lane was the kind of street where everyone knew everyone. Lawns were neatly trimmed, cars polished, and the occasional holiday lights were the only excitement. Among the neighbors, Thomas Weaver stood out, not because of charm or friendliness, but because he was quiet. Too quiet. He never socialized, rarely left his home, and no one knew much about him. That changed one chilly November morning. A young woman, Emily Rivera, had been reported missing by her roommate after failing to return from a night shift. She was 24, independent, and careful, so her sudden disappearance raised alarm. The police started tracing her steps. GPS data indicated her phone had last pinged near Maplewood Lane. Officers went door to door, asking neighbors if anyone had seen her. When they reached Thomas Weaver's home, he answered politely, claiming ignorance. His house seemed empty, the blinds tightly shut, but something didn't sit right with Detective Laura Green. During a standard welfare check, officers noticed the back door slightly ajar. Inside, the house looked clean and ordinary, until they reached the basement. The smell hit first, metallic, musty, unmistakable. Behind a false panel, they discovered a hidden room. Inside were items clearly belonging to Emily, clothing, a purse, and documents. And in the corner, restrained and barely conscious, Emily herself. She had been held for over 24 hours, carefully monitored and manipulated to prevent escape. Thomas Weaver's history revealed a pattern. He had been living undetected in Maplewood for years, targeting young women who were new to the area. He would study their routines, wait for opportunities, and abduct them, often keeping them in hidden spaces within his home. Investigators found detailed logs, video surveillance inside the hidden room, and notebooks outlining strategies to avoid detection. Emily's quick thinking, pressing an emergency button she carried for safety, alerted authorities before Weaver could escalate the crime further. During the trial, Emily testified, recounting hours of fear, manipulation, and Thomas Weaver's calm demeanor that made her think she could never escape. The jury was horrified by the meticulous planning and psychological control he exerted. Weaver was convicted on multiple counts, including kidnapping, false imprisonment, and attempted assault. He was sentenced to life. Without parole, Maplewood Lane would never feel the same. Neighbors installed cameras, doors were reinforced, and the story of the quiet neighbor became a chilling lesson. Appearances can deceive, and sometimes, the danger lives right next door, hidden behind closed doors and polite greetings. The Velvet Lounge was one of the hottest spots in the city, known for its flashing lights, booming music, and crowded dance floors. Everyone came to see and be seen. Security was tight, bouncers were everywhere, and most patrons felt safe under the neon glow. Until the night of July 12th, the club had hired a freelance photographer, 26-year-old Darren Cole, to capture the vibe of the evening. He was friendly, outgoing, and everyone assumed he was there to document fun, not fear. But Darren had a secret. Hidden inside his camera bag, tucked carefully under lenses and equipment, was a small high-definition pinhole camera. Positioned in corners near women's restrooms and secluded areas, it captured footage no one was supposed to see. Darren wasn't documenting parties, he was documenting victims. By 11:30 p.m., a young woman named Lila Bennett realized something was off. She had noticed Darren lingering near the stairwell every time she passed. Feeling uneasy, she moved away. That small instinct saved her life. Police were alerted when a club employee found Darren's camera bag abandoned near the DJ booth. Inside were hundreds of images and hours of video, footage of women in private moments, completely unaware they were being watched. Some videos showed harassment, and a few contained disturbing physical assaults. Forensic experts traced Darren's online accounts. He had been selling clips to anonymous buyers for months. Each sale was carefully disguised under usernames and cryptocurrency transactions. The scope was staggering. Detectives tracked Darren to his apartment. There, they discovered a wall lined with monitors, cables running into hidden rooms, and more cameras pointing toward common areas, even his neighbors' yards. Police also found journals detailing which victims were high value and detailed observations about their routines. At trial, the jury was shown footage, carefully redacted to protect victims' identities, but enough to establish his methodical stalking. Victims testified about the psychological trauma, knowing someone had been watching them for months unseen and how it affected their daily lives. Darren Cole was convicted of multiple counts: voyeurism, harassment, stalking, and assault. He was sentenced to life in prison. The Velvet Lounge installed full security upgrades, staff training, and strict checks for all photographers and media personnel. Patrons returned, but the club's energy never fully recovered. The case became a chilling reminder. Predators don't always lurk in dark alleys. Sometimes, they carry cameras, smile at you, and blend into the crowd, watching, waiting, and documenting every private moment, until someone notices just in time. Riverside Medical Center was known for its excellent patient care and attentive staff. Nurses were praised for their professionalism, and families trusted the hospital with their loved ones. Among them was Emma Caldwell, a registered nurse with over a decade of experience, who worked the overnight shift in the geriatrics wing. At first, Emma seemed like the perfect caregiver, quiet, efficient, always calm under pressure. Patients appreciated her gentle demeanor, and colleagues trusted her implicitly. But behind the routine of nightly vital checks and medication rounds, something sinister was brewing. Over a span of 6 months, patient deaths in Emma's wing began to rise slightly above statistical expectations. Administrators initially blamed age, chronic illness, or complication. But a few anomalies caught the attention of the hospital's internal review board. Deaths were clustered during her shifts. Certain patients had strange medication levels in their system. An anonymous nurse finally spoke up. She noticed that Emma frequently stayed after her shift ended, lingering in empty patient rooms with supplies that didn't match hospital protocols. Sometimes she took blood samples for testing without authorization. She seemed obsessed with certain patients, documenting everything in private notebooks rather than hospital records. Police were called to investigate. Forensic analysis of medical records and medication logs revealed a chilling pattern. Several patients had been administered lethal doses of heart medications and sedatives in rapid succession. Emma's access to medications and her ability to manipulate patient charts allowed her to cover her tracks effectively. The investigation uncovered hidden video footage from security cameras. Emma could be seen entering rooms late at night, often after the official shift had ended, handling medications, and sometimes standing silently over beds where patients soon passed away. During the trial, families of the deceased testified about the confusion and grief caused by the sudden losses. Emma's calm exterior in court contrasted sharply with the horrific impact of her actions, which prosecutors described as methodical and intentional. Experts testified that she had exploited her position of trust to commit murder under the guise of care. Emma Caldwell was convicted on multiple counts of murder and abuse of a vulnerable population. She received life without parole. In response, Riverside Medical Center overhauled its overnight staffing, implemented stricter medication tracking, and installed surveillance in critical areas. For the families, the betrayal was profound. The nurse they had trusted to care for their loved ones had instead become the instrument of their deaths. Riverside learned a harsh lesson. Sometimes, the person responsible for saving lives can hide behind a stethoscope and commit unspeakable acts in silence. The Parker family had been excited for months. They purchased a fixer-upper on the outskirts of Willow Creek, a charming 2-story house with peeling paint, creaky floors, and the potential to become their dream home. The plan was simple: renovate over the summer, make it theirs, and move in before the school year started. They hired a contractor, 42-year-old Marcus Lyle, who came highly recommended. Friendly, professional, and attentive, he seemed perfect. The Parkers trusted him completely, allowing him unrestricted access to the house for weeks. It was during a demolition of the old basement that the first sign of something strange appeared. Marcus suggested removing a portion of the wall behind the laundry area, a wall that wasn't on the original blueprints. He said it was rotten and unsafe. The Parkers agreed, not thinking twice. But when the wall came down, construction workers found something horrifying: a shallow grave, hidden for years, containing human remains. The bones were partially decayed, but forensic analysis revealed the victim had been murdered and buried there decades earlier. The police were called immediately. Investigators discovered that the property had once belonged to a man named Victor Haynes, who had been reported missing 20 years ago. The remains matched Victor's description. Further investigation revealed a chilling connection. Marcus Lyle was not just a contractor. He had been obsessed with the history of the house and had tracked Victor's family for decades. He had secretly purchased the property under a false identity years ago, waiting for the opportunity to hide evidence of a long unsolved murder in a place no one would suspect. Marcus had carefully concealed the bones during renovations, moving them around to avoid detection and documenting every change in meticulous journals. He even attempted to manipulate the Parkers into rebuilding walls in ways that would further obscure the evidence. During the trial, prosecutors presented the journals, blueprints, and testimony from the construction crew who first discovered the bones. Experts explained how Marcus's obsession with the property and the victim created a calculated, methodical concealment of a murder. Marcus Lyle was convicted of first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and fraud, receiving life without parole. The Parker family, traumatized by the discovery, abandoned the house. The property was eventually sold to a historical preservation society, sealed and secured to prevent further incidents. Willow Creek residents were left shaken, reminded that sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, even in a home that appears ordinary, and that a trusted stranger, armed with skill and patience, can hide horrors in plain sight, waiting for decades to be uncovered. It was the start of the fall semester at Crestwood University, a sprawling campus known for its historic architecture and tight-knit student community. Among the new students was 19-year-old Jenna Park, a bright, ambitious sophomore who had just transferred from another school. She was outgoing, made friends quickly, and became involved in campus clubs almost immediately. Her disappearance began quietly. On a Friday night, Jenna attended a small gathering in an off-campus apartment with a few classmates. She was last seen leaving around midnight, saying she was heading back to her dorm. Friends assumed she would arrive safely. After all, Crestwood had a well-lit campus, security escorts and emergency call boxes every few hundred feet by Saturday morning. Jenna had not returned. Her roommate reported her missing. Campus security initiated a search, checking dormitories, friends' rooms, and surrounding streets. Nothing. No sign of her, no dropped belongings, no digital activity from her phone. Investigators soon uncovered something unsettling. Jenna's last known movements indicated she had walked toward an abandoned warehouse district near the edge of campus. Her phone's GPS pinged in an area often used by students for parties, but the location also had a reputation for squatters and criminal activity. Police obtained surveillance footage from nearby businesses. A dark-colored van was seen following Jenna as she left the party. She appeared to hesitate but continued walking, unaware of the vehicle trailing her. Inside the van was a man known to authorities for prior assaults in the city, a transient who had been watching campus activity for weeks. The search intensified. 3 days later, Jenna's backpack was found near a dumpster behind a closed warehouse. Forensic evidence linked the van to the scene, fibers matching the interior seats, fingerprints, and DNA traces. Inside the warehouse, officers discovered a small, hidden room. Jenna was inside, alive but restrained and terrified. She recounted how the man had abducted her after she walked alone, holding her captive while attempting to extort money and gain leverage for further criminal activity. The suspect was arrested shortly thereafter. Evidence showed meticulous planning. He had watched Jenna's patterns, noted her routines, and waited for an opportune moment when she would be isolated. During the trial, Jenna bravely testified, detailing the abduction, confinement, and psychological manipulation she endured. The jury also reviewed surveillance footage, GPS data, and digital records, all proving premeditation and intent. The court convicted the man on multiple counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, and attempted extortion. He received life without parole. Crestwood University implemented new safety measures, mandatory security escorts after dark, additional lighting in previously dark areas, and awareness campaigns for students about walking alone. Jenna returned to campus the following semester, but the ordeal left an indelible mark. The case became a cautionary tale about the dangers that lurk even in familiar surroundings, and the importance of vigilance, community, and speaking up when something seems off. Lincoln High School in Ashford was known for its strong academic programs and dedicated staff. Among them was 34-year-old Mark Donovan, a popular history teacher who inspired students with lectures about courage, revolution, and morality. To parents, he seemed perfect, polite, attentive, and genuinely invested in his students' futures. No one suspected that behind closed doors, Mark was living a dangerous double life. It began with minor discrepancies noticed by colleagues, unusual late-night absences, mysterious phone calls, and encrypted messages that appeared on his school-issued laptop. At first, these were dismissed as personal matters. But when a student's laptop was found hacked with explicit files, IT traced the activity to Mark's accounts. Police became involved after a series of anonymous tips suggested that Mark had been targeting students online, grooming and coercing them into sharing inappropriate photos. Investigators quickly realized that this was more than digital misconduct. Mark had been meeting some students in secluded areas, under the guise of tutoring sessions and exploiting their trust. The case escalated when one parent discovered a hidden storage area in Mark's garage. Inside were hundreds of photographs, journals detailing manipulative tactics, and videos showing some of the crimes. Shocking. Gly, many of these victims were still minors. Evidence indicated that Mark had been meticulously documenting everything, creating a personal archive to maintain control and extort silence. During the trial, victims bravely testified, describing how Mark had manipulated them with promises of mentorship, favoritism, and access to scholarships. Psychological experts explained his methods: grooming, coercion, and intimidation designed to instill fear and dependency. The prosecution presented compelling evidence: digital records, surveillance footage from tutoring centers, and the cache of photos and journals found in his garage. Mark's defense attempted to claim privacy violations and exaggerated allegations, but the court was unconvinced. The jury found Mark Donovan guilty on multiple counts: child exploitation, coercion, extortion, and possession of illegal material. He was sentenced to life without parole. Ashford High School underwent sweeping changes. Staff underwent extensive background checks, counseling services were increased, and students were educated about online safety and boundaries. For the victims and the community, the betrayal was profound. The man who had taught lessons about integrity had secretly manipulated and harmed those he was entrusted to guide. The case served as a stark reminder: sometimes the person entrusted with shaping young minds may be hiding the darkest of secrets, and vigilance, even in trusted institutions, is essential. It was supposed to be the ultimate college road trip. 4 friends, Sam, Lily, Marcus, and Jenna, packed into a rented SUV, ready for a weekend getaway along the scenic coastal highway. Laughter, music, and excitement filled the car as they left campus behind. But by nightfall, the trip had taken a deadly turn. Around 11:30 p.m., the SUV was stopped on a remote stretch of highway near the cliffs. Witnesses later recalled seeing the car parked strangely at the side of the road, lights flickering. No one approached at the time, assuming the friends had pulled over to rest. When the group failed to return to campus the next day, their families grew concerned. Campus security checked in with police, tracing the rental vehicle to its last GPS location. The coordinates placed the car near the cliffs. Investigators discovered a trail of evidence leading away from the road: crushed grass, tire marks, and scattered belongings. Following the trail into a dense wooded area, police uncovered a horrifying scene. The SUV had been abandoned, but inside the trunk, Marcus and Jenna were found restrained, frightened, and dehydrated, but alive. Sam and Lily, however, were missing. Forensic investigation revealed the sequence of events. Marcus and Jenna had been abducted after a chance encounter with a stranger they had offered a ride to earlier in the day. Sam and Lily had been attacked and murdered shortly after refusing to comply with the assailants' demands. The attacker had staged the SUV to mislead authorities, using the car to lure the remaining friends into the woods. The suspect, 29-year-old Thomas Keene, had a history of targeting travelers along isolated roads. He meticulously planned each attack, tracking victims online, monitoring social media posts about trips, and following vehicles for hours before striking. Evidence from cell towers, GPS data, and tire tracks confirmed his pattern. During the trial, survivors Marcus and Jenna provided testimony about the terror they endured, being restrained in the trunk, hearing the cries of their friends, and the calculated psychological manipulation designed to break their will. Forensic experts detailed how Keene's planning ensured he remained one step ahead. From the abandoned vehicle to the choice of secluded attack locations, Keene was convicted on multiple counts, including 2 murders, 2 attempted murders, and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life without parole. The case shook the college community. Students were warned about giving rides to strangers, staying in groups during travel, and maintaining constant communication with friends and family. For Marcus and Jenna, survival came with lasting trauma. For the families of Sam and Lily, the tragedy became a lifelong scar, and for the authorities, it served as a stark reminder. Sometimes the roads you think are safe can hide predators waiting patiently, watching, and ready to turn a fun adventure into a nightmare. Catherine Wells moved into apartment 7B on Cedar Street, seeking a fresh start. Newly divorced, she wanted peace, independence, and a place where she could finally feel safe. The building seemed quiet, the neighbors polite but distant, and life appeared normal, but someone was watching her. At first it was subtle. A package slightly moved, a door left ajar that she was sure she had locked, shadows passing by the peephole when no one should have been outside. Catherine brushed it off as paranoia. She had just gone through a difficult divorce. Stress can play tricks on the mind. Then the phone call started. No one on the line. Heavy breathing, faint laughter, sometimes just static. Catherine documented each instance, feeling increasingly unsafe but unsure who could be behind it. The breaking point came one night when she returned from work to find her apartment ransacked. Everything was in its place but slightly altered, as if someone had been studying her habits. A small folded note sat on her kitchen counter. "I know when you're alone." Terrified, Catherine called the police. Officers checked the building and reviewed security footage. At first, nothing seemed amiss, but one camera, positioned near the maintenance corridor, captured a man entering and exiting 7 Billions at odd hours. The image was grainy, but the posture and gait were familiar, someone Catherine had seen in the building before. Investigators traced the suspect to 6 Billions, the apartment directly next door. It was rented by 38-year-old Samuel Gray, a quiet man who had lived in the building for years. Neighbors described him as polite but reclusive, never interacting much with anyone. Police executed a search warrant. Inside, they found a meticulously organized observation room, filled with monitors, notebooks, and hidden cameras. Everything in Catherine's apartment had been recorded, her routines, habits, and private moments. They also discovered plans indicating the stalker had intended to escalate his control. During the trial, Catherine bravely testified about the psychological torment she endured, recounting nights of fear, paranoia, and sleeplessness. Expert witnesses described Samuel Gray as a calculated predator who had studied his victim for months, exploiting trust and proximity to remain unnoticed. The jury convicted Samuel Gray on multiple counts: stalking, harassment, invasion of privacy, and attempted assault. He received life without parole. Cedar Street residents were left shaken. Tenants installed additional locks, security cameras, and community watch programs. Catherine eventually moved to a new city, forever changed by the ordeal, but determined to reclaim her life. The case became a stark warning. Sometimes, the threat doesn't come from strangers outside, but from the person living right next door, silent, unnoticed, and meticulously watching every move. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when the unusual package arrived at the doorstep of the Rivera family in Oakwood Heights. The family, Maria, a nurse, her husband Daniel, and their 9-year-old son Lucas, had ordered supplies online, but nothing matched the size or weight of the box sitting on their porch. There was no return address, only a single handwritten label for the Rivera family. "Open immediately." Daniel brought the box inside, thinking it was a mistaken delivery. Maria glanced at it suspiciously but shrugged, assuming it was just another company mix-up. They decided to open it together in the kitchen. Inside, wrapped carefully in layers of bubble wrap and plastic, were items that seemed innocuous at first: a set of tools, a small camera, and a handwritten note. E-note was cryptic. "You should have listened. Now it's too late to warn anyone." Before they could process the message, the camera powered on automatically. A recording played, a video of someone watching their home, someone inside their garage, someone leaving ominous footprints across their driveway. The figure's face was obscured, but the message was clear. They were being stalked, and the sender had inside knowledge of the family's routines. Panicked, Daniel called the police immediately. Investigators traced the package using delivery records, surveillance footage from the postal center, and GPS tracking embedded in the shipping label. The trail led to a man named Victor Kane, a 34-year-old former employee of a delivery company who had been fired for suspicious activity. Kane had been obsessed with the Rivera family for months, tracking their habits, delivery schedules, and even Maria's hospital shifts. Police issued an urgent alert and conducted a sweep of the neighborhood. Kane was apprehended hiding in an abandoned storage facility near Oakwood Heights. Inside, they found evidence of extensive surveillance, cameras, photos, maps, and journals documenting the Rivera family's every move. Kane had planned a physical break-in to escalate his harassment and possibly cause harm, but the police intervention prevented tragedy. During the trial, prosecutors presented a chilling timeline of Kane's obsession: monitoring routines, manipulating deliveries to deliver fear, and detailed notes on the family's vulnerabilities. Psychologists described him as methodical, obsessive, and highly dangerous. Victims testified about the terror of being watched in their own home, knowing someone had been tracking them for months. Victor Kane was convicted on multiple counts: stalking, harassment, attempted burglary, and conspiracy to commit assault. He was sentenced to life without parole. The Rivera family installed reinforced doors, motion sensors, and a full home security system. Lucas, once oblivious to the dangers of the world, learned early about vigilance, trust, and the importance of safety. The Oakwood Heights case became a cautionary tale about modern threats. In an age of deliveries, online tracking, and constant movement, danger can arrive wrapped in a cardboard box at your doorstep. Sometimes, the scariest intruders aren't strangers in the shadows. They are people who know exactly where you live, exactly when you are alone, and exactly how to make you afraid without ever stepping inside, until it's almost too late.